Wow.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, Namnukwa, Osinachi. One man, Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, Mama, Osinachi. Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, Namnukwa, Osinachi. One man, Osinachi, I'm watching. Daily Osinachi, Mama, Osinachi.
Hi everyone. For those with slide, I think it's time for us to start test running the screen sharing function.
Thank you very much. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Good evening. We can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for joining. Thanks to our panelists. We'll start in a moment. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. Okay. Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Blitzen. Thanks, Tampen and Lukman. Okay, I can see you. Just one more person. We are waiting for Dr. Muyiwa. Okay, thank you so much for joining this evening.
Now, I come off that post. Okay. I mean.
Okay, good evening to everybody joining this session this evening. I hope I'm audible enough. Okay, thank you very much for joining. We are welcome to the second panel session that we're having in favor for Professor Taibat Lawanson, and welcome to the 6th Annual Lagos Studies Association Conference. And today we'll be reflecting on critical reflections on everyday urban engagement and experiences in favor of Professor Taibat Lawanson's contribution to knowledge to scholarship. And this particular meeting or this particular panel is actually organized by 3 of us, Dr. Oluwafemi Olajide from the University of Lagos, Dr. Odumba Kwomo at the UN Habitat, and also myself at the University of Witwatersrand. And this evening, we're going to take it to the next level. And just before we start, I'll just take a citation for the person we are celebrating today. Hopefully she'll be able to join us anytime from now, but at the moment she's at the WOOF conference, so I'm not sure, but she should be able to join us. But otherwise, we'll go ahead with our presentation this evening, wherever we are.
She's here already.
She already?
Yeah.
Can't see. Okay.
She's in the attendees.
Okay, can you please migrate her to the panelists? So
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you so much. Okay, so today we are celebrating our own Professor Taibat Lawanson. She's done a lot in urban scholarship. And so let me just go and read the citation. She says, Professor Taibat Lawanson, she's a specialist. One second. She's a specialist in urban management and governance at the University of Lagos, Nigeria, where she leads the Proper Development Research Cluster and serves as the co-director at the Center for Housing and Sustainable Development. She is an urban development expert and holds a PhD in urban and regional planning from the University of Technology, Accra, Nigeria. Her research focuses on the interface of social complexities, urban realities, and the pursuit of spatial justice in Africa. A recipient of numerous academic awards, she has received research funding from DFID, DAAD, Norwegian Research Council, Erebodge Stephen, British Academy, and the Royal Academy of Engineering, UKRI, African Multiple of the University of Beirut and Cambridge, Africa, and Burada Funds, amongst others. Taibat currently serves on the International Advisory Committee of the UN Habitat's flagship State of the World Cities. She's also a member of the editorial advisory committee of major urban studies journal, including the Urban Studies, Urban Forum, and Area Development and Policy. She's a member of the board of directors of the Lagos Studies Association, a pioneer World Social Science Fellow of the International Social Science Council, Fellow of the Nigerian Institute of Architects, of Town Planners, and a proud alumni of the Rockefeller Foundation Bellagio Center. Yes, so today we are celebrating Professor Taibat Lawanson scholarship, what she's done in the urban space. And so we are looking today at look at the proper urban development, the present day urban realities, the everyday urban experiences, looking at our work. And today to start off, we'll be starting off with our town planner, Lukman Oshodi. And so what we expect first is, so we have around for all the panelists, you have about 5 to 7 to just reflect on your interactions with our work, whatever you've done together. And today we'll start forth with town planner Lukman Oshodi. And let me just read the citation. It says, Lukman Oshodi, Commonwealth Professional Fellow, is the project director of Arctic Infrastructure, a multidisciplinary private organization with a broad focus on infrastructure delivery, urban development, and the environment. Lukman Oshodi is an infrastructure, urban development, and city system strategist. He is currently coordinating the Green Climate Fund bid project with the Arctic Infrastructure in conjunction with the Lagos State Ministry of the Environment and Water Resources, Water Aid UK, UNDP, and the UN Habitat. He's also leading multiple study projects with the Erebodge Stephen, covering housing types and mortgage system for low-income groups, transportation, and climate resilient infrastructure in the city of Lagos. So we're having town planner Lukman, but let me just say 1 or 2 hours before we go ahead. So please, if you have any comments, you can leave it in the chat box, or if you have a question, you can also leave it there. We'll take your questions later. Thank you very much. Town planner Lukman, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Good to be here. A celebration of a very distinguished colleague, Professor Taibat Lawanson. And I'm glad to be part of this history-making event because since I've known her, she has been a good inspiration. And I will say she has been somebody who pioneered what I may call who bring a first into different ideas or different issues in the city of Lagos, not only in Lagos, but in Africa, in terms of saying we are doing this first. You know, I'm quite amazed that in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, the focus or the ability of that department to understand the unique characteristics of a city of Lagos, that this city is not just about luxury apartments, which constitute maybe less than 30% of the city architecture anyway, that this city is about informal settlement, informal development, informal economy. Professor Taibat Lawanson brought that idea into that department, as far as I know. And I'm glad that that idea is really gaining ground. It's really becoming a focal point for many students who are passing through that department to really understand the DNA of the city of Lagos. So for that, I really congratulate her. I'm happy that is able to bring that innovation on board. Is able to change the way we see urban planning as a discipline. She's able to change the way we see urban development as a practice in the city of Lagos. I'm quite happy. I'm proud of her. And of course, I would need to quickly add that when it comes to inspiring, motivating other people, she cannot place a second position in that regard, because she's the type that will encourage you and say, hey, you cannot give up at this point in time. You just have to keep moving, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And she has a way of really, pushing, persuading, and making people to really see the course of action and why they must take that course of action. So for me, I think she has come a long way, and I'm quite happy, and I say congratulations to her. And like I said, I'm happy to be part of this event and making a process this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Town Planner Lukman. Thank you. We can also identify with what you were saying, that from a scholarship, Lagos is not just one-sided. It's not just for the rich, but also for the urban poor. There are two sides, not just for the luxury aspect of Lagos, and also in terms of our pushing people to inspire people, to motivate us. Thank you so much. We'll get back to you soon. So we move on to the next person who will be reflecting. 1 second. Let me just do this. Okay. So we're moving to Dr. Olumuyiwa Bayode Adegun this evening to give us his own reflection. So Olumuyiwa Adegun is a senior lecturer in the Department of Architecture at the Federal University of Akure, Technology Akure, Nigeria. His research interest centers on environmental sustainability in low-income housing, such as slums and informal settlement in cities across sub-Saharan Africa. So this evening we'll be having Dr. Olumuyiwa give his reflection on the scholarships given by Professor Taibat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Taiwo, for that introduction. Let me appreciate the opportunity to be here to join my voice in acknowledging first and then celebrating our own Professor Taibat Lawanson. Okay, I first heard about her through the World Social Science Fellowship. I was a fellow in 2015, and she was a fellow much earlier. I think that should be 2011 or 2012. So that's my earliest memories of her. Although we both attended the same university, she was doing a PhD while I was doing my master's, but we didn't have opportunity to meet. But we also, our connections became stronger through the VIT TUB project, which started in 2016. My PhD supervisor, Marie Zemeya, she participated in the earlier session, and Fana were principal investigators on the project. So Taibat was involved. So it's been a relatively short connection, but quite eventful and inspiring. I do tell people about how much she has done. And I mean, let me just make this personal reflection. The day I knew her age, I wonder she had achieved a lot in a short time. So it's quite interesting to note that. So my entry point is to note a pattern in urban scholarship in Nigeria. So from around 17 years ago, while an undergraduate student, I had picked interest in urban scholarship. I had read a couple of things about urban scholarship in Nigeria. So from the 70s to the 80s, the site of knowledge production in urban studies in Nigeria is generally came from Ibadan. So you talk about the Ibadan guys. You can underline the word Ibadan. You can underline the word guys, having significant connotation. So you have a lot of fantastic scholars, Professor Mabu Nje, Professor Faneron, Professor Abumere, Professor Onibokun. I mean, great people you would like to have lunch with, you would like to discuss. I mean, those were the key players in terms of urban scholarship in Nigeria. Maybe there was a lull in the 1990s. I stand to be corrected. Now, when I say that Ibadan was a site, I do not mean there were no urban studies research taking place anywhere else, but where you had a concentration of voices, where you had a major work coming out from in the 70s and the 80s was from university or from their next door neighbor at NISA, or the other institutions like CASAD, which came to be much after. So fast forward to democratic era, and with the commencement of urban regional program in Lagos, we now have an additional site of significant urban studies research in Nigeria coming from Lagos. And it's very important to acknowledge the voice of Professor Taibat in that regard. She's one of those raising the decibels in terms of urban scholarship from University of Lagos. So we now have a site of significant work of notable voices from the University of Lagos. And it's not just a male cohort now. So that's why I said you can underline the word guys, Ibadan guys, from the 1970s. So it's quite significant. And the contrast is that the Ibadan guys were, sorry, this is my concussion anyway, to use the word Ibadan guys. They were mostly educated from the West. They were not significantly detached from the colonial trajectory of education and practice. And much unlike what we have now, significantly led by Professor Taibat, we now have a more decolonial approach. The impacts of, I mean, you have significant approaches in terms of co-production of knowledge and a lot of advocacy links between science and society taking place. The primary society you engage, maybe those days were just the practitioners. So this is very important to acknowledge, because this is our sphere, our circle, and such an interesting one. And it's also good to note, in contrast to what we might have had earlier from early scholarship in Nigeria, now you find a lot of attention paid to informality. You have attention paid to the aspect, a lot of Afro realities. I use the word Afro realities to identify the link to African studies. So the city is not just a generic, benign, a plastic stuff. There are significant links to a lot of Afro realities, which her work embodies, and then the aspects of local economic development, touching on poverty. So in the remaining few minutes, I'll pick on our work on slums and informal settlement because this is my primary area of interest. She's done a couple of work on slums, a couple of work on informal settlements, and then I've seen quite a lot of paper. But before I go into the work on slums and informal settlements, she's done work in other areas, aspects of violence, urban violence and peace, and the aspect of global agenda. I mean, she wrote a paper on MDGs, and she's writing on the SDGs, which is taking over MDGs. And this touches on aspects of human settlements and local economic issues. In our work on slums, she illuminates realities within informal settlement. There is a lot to understand about informal settlement, and our work reflects on that from aspects of livelihoods to aspects of resilience, what social capital can contribute to resilience, to socioeconomic conditions in terms of poverty, to how local agency is developed and how it can be deployed for slum upgrading. So our work touches on all this. And much of this is taking place within Lagos. She's covered a lot of settlement. I mean, if we could put together all the settlements where she's done some field work, I mean, she has touched on maybe almost every region in Lagos, which is very interesting. But I would reflect on that later because it's, of course, not enough. So you cannot talk about the scholarship on Lagos as a city in terms of urban planning, urban development without touching on our work. So we might be having a reincarnation of Mabugunje's, maybe not as a textbook now. I mean, Mabugunje gave us that seminar book on Lagos, but she's giving us pockets of works dealing with Lagos. I know I have a few minutes before I'm knocked with the alarm. So Lagos is growing. I mean, this is where I'm just taking it off. Lagos is growing, and we need growth driven by knowledge, knowledge produced to research, knowledge co-produced to research. So I would say we need to do more. I mean, maybe to say it in more informal time, to say we need more of Professor Lawanson's, because we don't know enough about Lagos and how we can make it work. We need people in the public sector need knowledge. People in the private sector need knowledge. I specifically touch on private sector because you find a lot of people who have the capital, who have the money, are interested in city, but you find a lot of ignorance on their part. So they have the money, they don't have the right knowledge, how to produce cities that are livable. So we need more knowledge, even in the informal sector. People who might say they are on the ground, we need to produce more knowledge and to take the knowledge that we already have to them. And that's also touched on our work and advocacy and a sprinkle of activism in terms of pushing the frontiers of urban practice and development. So we need more of we need to understand the heterogeneity across slums and informal settlements. And we need knowledge how we can produce cities that work. We do need more knowledge, but we also need action, and knowledge, action. I would put it together as a compact word. So I would be stopping from there, but it's very interesting to acknowledge what she has done. But of course, coming off to say there is a lot more to be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moyewa. Thank you for your reflections. And so on not in a lighter note, but the session we had on Thursday, many of the panelists actually mentioned that she's actually the newest Mabukunje, that kind of a thing, that she's actually taking off from where it's taught and bringing up scholarship in Lagos, in Africa, and the voices for the people. Thank you so much.
Oh, interesting. I didn't attend the session, so I'm not.
That was what was said. That she's actually a voice. And I like what you said, saying that she's a site of significant notable voice from Lagos. So it's not so much of scholarship coming from outside. We're having people saying things happening and giving us a better narrative. Thank you so much for your reflections. At this point, we'll be moving on to our own doctor. Okay, 1 second, let me just project this, okay. Thank you. We'll be moving on to Dr. Lindsay. Yes, thank you so much for joining us this evening. So Dr. Lindsay Sawyer is a research fellow in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at the University of Sheffield. She's part of the multi-city, multi-partner project, Migration, Urbanization, and Conflict in African Cities alongside Professor Lawanson, where she leads on comparative methods and conceptual development. Lindsay's work broadly focuses on critical and ethical approaches to urban informalities, particularly related to Lagos, land and governance, and majority urbanism. So this evening, join me in welcoming Dr. Lindsay to give our reflections on the scholarship of Professor Taibat Lawanson. Over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to show my appreciation of our prof. I'll start with how I met Taibat, if I may. And that was more than 10 years ago as a very small girl coming to Lagos with bold ambitions of understanding how it works and walking into Unilag. And I was so fortunate to be introduced or introduce myself to Taibat Lawanson, who was then so generous with her time and her knowledge. And I learned so much from her and really grounded my ideas of a young PhD student and really developed them as well. So I really am so grateful to you for that. And you continue to have an influence on my work. And I think what I quickly found, and I think anyone who researches on Lagos will find, you can't write on Lagos without citing a Lawanson paper. So I think that will long be the case. And even, you know, with all this celebration, I think Prof is too modest. I think you have a real quiet confidence and humility. And it's such a pleasure to see your work recognized now and becoming this international go-to person for Lagos, which is so richly deserved. And I think, yeah, before going on to scholarship, there are two things to highlight, I think. So beyond scholarship, Prof is such a champion of women, both within academia and then also in the communities that you work with as well. And so supportive and really doing that work in a very meaningful way. And something else that is not to be underestimated is how you balance the interests of different people, different stakeholders, and then also in academia, balancing senior colleagues, junior colleagues, and really that's an incredibly hard thing to do. And I think you do it very well and with such grace. And yes, you're extraordinarily productive. So it's, as I say, you're powering us all on, not just in this current project that we're working on, but really keeping the scholarship on Lagos really alive and current. And yeah, I think you're doing the really much needed work because as was previously said, much more needs to be known about Lagos, but how you know it and how that you then write about it is so important. So you're doing really the much needed work of deeply embedded, theoretically engaged scholarship, and also engaging with just key current debates like climate change and health, and really taken COVID-19 into that as well. So as I say, really keeping it alive and current. And your work with the Centre for Housing and Sustainable Development, again, this is just such what's needed. And you're really doing the essential work. So be outside of South Africa, you know, it's Lagos is becoming the hub, the center of urban research and African urbanism. And you're such a crucial part of that. So yes, overall, so I'm very humbled and grateful to know you, and long may you continue your work So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lindsay. Thanks for your generosity in terms of the words, and also talking about Professor Taibat in terms of our time and knowledge. Welcome to everybody. Whether she's meeting you for the first time, she's ready to give you advice to go on. And I think I can drop this. When I got to Lagos for my fieldwork, I met her once and she gave me a couple of people to interview, and I was able to finish my fieldwork just because I had one meeting with her. Thank you so much for that. So at this point, we'll be moving on to our man who is at WOOF at the present. 1 second, please. We're moving on to Dr. Remy. Okay, and let me just do this. 1 second. Okay. Thank you very much. So our next panelist will be Dr. Remy, who is presently at Poland, I think, at WOOF, and I think he'll be giving us reflection, what should we expect from the UN Habitat. But first and foremost, we'd like to have his reflection on Professor Taibat's work. And let me just take a citation. It says, Dr. Remy is the Chief of Policy, Legislation, and Governance section within Urban Practice Branch of the UN Habitat. He is currently overseeing the development of strategic programs of the UN Habitat, including urban policy, legislation, governance, urban-rural linkages, smart cities, metropolitan management. He has coordinated global, regional, and country projects and programs for the UN Habitat in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. He has previously worked on urban health, land climate change, urban and territorial planning. Dr. Remy has over 25 years of working experience in the UN system, UNECA and UN Habitat, academia, private and public sector, and NGOs in Australia, Cameroon, Ethiopia, Jamaica, and worldwide. He holds a PhD in geography from the University of Melbourne, Australia. Thank you very much for joining us, and please let's have your reflections. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Tawa. A pleasure. I think I will come in here to compliment some of the, very good words, which are, of course, well-deserved, which are genuine. I have noticed that many have spoken from their heart. So allow me to also speak really from my heart. When I had come to know Professor Lawanson, I think there are some key words or some key aspects that are emerging, and some of you would maybe reckon with that. I would start by saying this is our professor of Lagos, as we mentioned earlier, and informal settlement specialist, because she had this dimension of considering, appreciating the dynamics of why people who are considered living in informal settlements matter for the type of urban fabrics we see in Lagos. So welcome, Prof. Welcome to the 11th session of the World Urban Forum in Katowice. I look forward to bumping into you soon. When, some of the things that transpire in her work, I was very fortunate that you share some of the work, and I had to do my own homework and check some of, what had really shaped your, this great professor that we have in Africa to understand urban settings. Some of the key words for me is really that element of resilience and understanding space and time. Because in some of the work, and I reflect to mention a few, is you will understand why, for instance, she was ahead of her time well before the SDGs, because her work talks about leaving no one and no space behind. That's why some of the places where she works have somehow been neglected. Some people where she tried to understand their resilience and why they can be more entrepreneurial are sometimes overlooked. So she had very much dedicated her work to understand the urban dynamics, the urban poverty, the different fabrics, those who are victims, those who are benefiting. And that's why today is not by accident that she's working on that power dynamics under the governance work. So if you recall her MSc dissertation, you would understand why she focused the title was Comparative Analysis of Survival Strategies of the Urban Poor in Selected Cities. And this is very, very much kind of premonition of what would define, and she saw that niche in actually focusing on some of these areas. And that aspect of ingenuity really came up very much later on, where she pushed a little bit further that boundary of we have to see the creativity, the optimism in urban areas, even in Lagos, because the narrative had been very negative. And when her PhD talks about assessing the home-based enterprises in residential areas in the greater Lagos, it tells you how much sometimes we have underestimated the power of this type of businesses in low-income areas to transform Lagos and why Lagos is so vibrant. Therefore, she had to now move into understanding what type of institution, what type of power relations are critical. And this, for me as a geographer, it resonates very well with me because she really put in place what we call the 3 Ps, for instance, what you talk about the places, the people, and then the type of paradigm you can put in place to ensure that there are the power relations better negotiated. And if we see some of the challenging themes or approaches she uses about system thinking, not having that fear of addressing complexity, embracing what we call the continuum. But let me just mention a few aspects that illustrate these areas or these issues that emerge in her work and that are quite inspiring, as was mentioned earlier. When she talks about economy, it's always about informal and formal. When she talks about space, some of her papers talk about rural-urban linkages. When she talks about power relations, she talks about formal and informal institutions and arrangement that make urban Lagos or urban settings work. So this idea of really reckoning with the reality of the, all this continuum of interaction within the space, within the places, is really unique to understand that complexity of Lagos. And I think as a geographer, it's important that these interactions are sometimes well articulated, and Prof had really mastered that art of bringing that positive, that complexity, simplify them to make it easier to understand. So if that 3 Ps of people, places, and politics, or Prof can navigate across that through her work, it tells us volume or how the scholarship of Prof it will leave and impact many Africans that have to be more hopeful. So if you look at some of the issues she had tackled from not only Lagos, but the story of Lagos, it can really be the same story for other mega cities in Africa. It can be relevant to Nigeria, to many other places. You are familiar with her work on what that touches on housing, poverty, health, climate change, security and safety, spatial planning, and others. But let me highlight one thing that sometimes maybe makes Prof who she is, because she's so unique, because one of the things she brings out is yearning for equity. She actually says she's a social justice activist, and that clearly shows in her work. And that's why some of the values of resilience, justice, teamwork, and when you look at her publications, she had co-published a lot with her students, with her peers, with people not in academia necessary. So her generosity of knowledge, availability, and other, I don't know how she balanced that with family, faith, and other things, but you are just a wonder that we all admire. And I feel very honored to be collaborating with you in the Global Diet and Activity Research Network, GDA. And from there, I can see how you are, who you are. So it's not by accident that a highly value-oriented professional like Prof, that dimension should not be detached from who the Prof is and why she performs the way she does. This tells us that the professional integrity, when we talk about urban, is very important. And academic is not different from faith, from the sense of responsibility, justice, fairness, and passion for the work we do. So Prof, thanks a lot for demonstrating that through your work, through your research and actions and interaction with everyone who have come closer to you. So as a testimony to you, Prof, I salute you for your academic courage and to inspire many colleagues, especially you were mentioning earlier, the gender, the women, again, with that big heart that you have. So thanks a lot for really taking care of those who need it and bringing out the positive aspect of urban dynamics using the case of Lagos. So again, a great thing as from UN Habitat, just to finish, to say we always happy and honored that you contribute to our work, that we can look into your work to get inspiration, to provide policy guidance at the global stage. So you will be a great contribution to the transformation that we are discussing here in Katowice. So we look forward and hoping that many will come to listen to you, to be inspired, to have the opportunity to be with you, Prof. So I will stop here. Sorry, I've been long, but you can't talk about Prof without getting emotional and passionate because it's infectious. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Remy. Thank you for your kind words. Thank you for your reflection. We all share the same feeling with you, talking about Professor Lawanson. At this point, we just have the last panelist for the first set of session. So at this point, we'll be having Monica Omuna, because I met her and she's a wonderful fellow. So Monica Omuna is a sociologist trained at the University of Munich, Germany. She has been working with a Reproach Foundation Nigeria, a German non-governmental organization for adult political education, affiliated to the German Green Party, and financed through the German Ministry of Technical Cooperation and Development since 1999, where she helped to establish its country office and was responsible for the Women's Rights Program. Since 2011, Monica Omuna has been the program manager of the Inclusive Megacity Lagos program, which works with civil society organizations, communities, academia, and government to develop and advocate for the proper gender sensitive and climate resilient urban solution. It's my pleasure to have Monica speak to us and tell us about our reflections on Professor Taibat Lawanson's work. Over to you.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Yeah, it's also for me an honor, of course, to be here at this session. I didn't hesitate when I was invited to speak and to be a panelist. And as the last speaker said, Professor Taibat can be called not only as an outstanding academic, but also as a social activist. I mean, I'm speaking more from that angle because I'm not in the academic world, so I cannot touch too much on her academic teaching and academic writing, but maybe more on how she contributes to our work. And that is quite significant. So, I mean, we all know that informality is actually as a way of socioeconomic life is a reality in African cities and of course in Lagos. So when I met Professor Taibat for the first time, I think it was around 2012, that was not evident. It was not an evident view to be had in the academic circles, just like Mr. Oshodi also said beforehand. Urban planning was then still more taught and practiced also as according to Western values, aesthetics, and concepts. And I think it's also among others, but mainly Professor Lawanson's merits that today this is gradually changing. And I think a lot has been achieved in the meantime to change the perception of the various stakeholders. I cannot so much talk, as I said, about the university, but of what we are trying to achieve here with our work in the civil society. So a key issue, of course, of informality is always this differing perception of the role of formality versus informality as drivers of development. And it's quite controversial, and that is what we have been doing, and where Professor Lawanson has been supporting us a lot. And let me take maybe a few of the main words or key concepts that she's always hammering on when we say that in the past decades, Lagos State government has undertaken a lot of, or tried to undertake development projects which are aimed at attracting local and foreign investment opportunities. And just like HBS, or my organization with our partners, Professor Lawanson has also voiced or raised questions on the usefulness of the destruction, for instance, of local markets for shopping malls, or the evictions of thousands of people from waterfront areas. There were various attacks in recent years on Makoko or in Otodogbame. Or also the privatization of the waste management sector in Lagos. I think it was in around 2017 or 2018, at the detriment of tens of thousands of informal waste workers, so to say, for the development of the city and its citizens. And what Professor Lawanson always calls it, he says it's currently it's a city for profit and not a city for the people. And I think I hear it a lot from her during our workshops. For instance, we had a co-creating inclusive Lagos workshop in 2017, which was very interesting for 2 days that she moderated, and she had where we visited communities. We had prominent people there from Lagos. And also recently in a co-creating workshop with young aspirants from various political parties that the Heinrich Böll Foundation organized. Those ones who want to aspire to for the elections 2023 for Lagos, either on the state or federal level. She also explained to them about what the difference is between city for profit instead and the city for the people. And I think it's very crucial that we take this out of academic circles and take it into, also into politics, into the communities. And also one point where she aligns a lot with our own thinking is, so when you have on one side the quest for formality, but where does Lagos really, where does it develop, where does it come from? And that is from the communities and from the self-help strategies of the communities, which is crucial to build urban resilience and to fill the gap that is left by government. So at the same time, I think she also warns us always that those communities and the poor, they are not, they do not necessarily have all a shared interest in our own approaches and in the conception of urban modernity. So it's key to understand the multiple local forms of negotiations and organizations of resilience and innovation that is going on at in the communities. And to, as she, I think, said, in one of the papers that I read, to recognize them as the determination of the urban Africans to find their own ways compared to the Western style of city making. So we had, we discussed this also in last year in a 3 days urban lab with the Center for Housing and Sustainable Development, which helped to create at UNILAG. We had an urban lab on local urban governance for 3 days, also with people from Kano and from Nsukka, with people from the communities. And where we also identified, for instance, together, and we want to have another lab this year, or that the community development associations are very strong, and their successful cooperation with their respective bales could be a key process to advocate for better services and infrastructure delivery at the local level. So yeah, the academic research that she has done provides us with the necessary data under theoretical framework. And so it's for us now to say how can we use it to improve the life of the people and to translate it into development. And as other speakers have already said, I mean, community is always at the center, or the communities are always at the center of her reflections and her strategies. And here, above all, the women, and also to understand how and to appreciate how women negotiate their everyday life in the cities differently. Yeah, another key I think concept is the co-production and co-creation. As I said already, as we keep on calling now also our workshops, it's the issue of co-production, where the communities have successfully engaged states or state agency institutions to improve service delivery. So forging, she also, I mean, she succeeds a lot in forging relations with government institutions and agencies, and to bring them closer to the community. I mean, one of the key examples is the Ajegunle Ikorodu Community Resilience Action Plan. I mean, you can find it on our website, that she did with the community of Ajegunle Ikorodu. It was in response of the pandemic of COVID-19. And I think it was really successful because, first of all, it was more like a research and mapping with the community, with community women. But after the action plan was established, I mean, with, through HPS, we wanted to implement it, and she really succeeded in, let me say, mentoring both the community, the different ministries. She always advised when the civil society that was responsible to also guide the community didn't know what to do further, and really facilitated the relationship with the government. And I think it was really an excellent example of how yeah, projects can be done and can be implemented successfully. And as I said, that was in response, that research was in response of COVID-19. So there's always a response to new phenomena, to new problems. And I know currently they are doing a research on IDPs, especially the women who are displaced and who are settling in urban centers here in Lagos and other centers. So it's always taking up new issues that also helps us from the civil society to maybe also to become aware of problems, and also to better know how to respond to some of those problems. She's also always open to new strategies. For instance, I mean, one of our partners does a lot in visualization, so she was very keen in taking it up as also not only as a tool for advocacy and creating awareness generally, but also maybe as a tool for her students. And what we also appreciate from Heinrich Böll Foundation is that she extends her teaching beyond UNILAG. She's also, I think she's a crucial figure in a research project that is between WITS and UNILAG and the University of Berlin, but also in implementing or in bringing up the Association of African Planning Schools. So we are not only concentrating at the research on Lagos and UNILAG, but go beyond and make the ideas more prominent in Africa. And the last but not least, one thing that we also appreciate a lot, and what is also our, what we also see as our target or objective is that she mentors young talents, and I think that is very crucial. And I'm sure a lot of people have already benefited from her, and so this increases also new voices, both locally here and internationally, and so that maybe one day it will not be always only Professor Lawanson, but there will be very prominent young talents from her courses that will take up her steps and take up her shoes. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica, for your kind words and reflections. So like you said, I'm also one of our mentees. So she's mentored so many of us across the world in different places. Thank you so much. So for our other attendees, please, you can leave your comments or questions in the chat box. But at this point, we just go through another round of questions to our panelists. But we'll start with Tambla and Lukman. And looking at Lagos, Africa generally, talking about the proper urban development, the present day reality, how do we bridge the gap between the urban poor and the urban rich? Let's put it that way. In terms of infrastructure, like you said, our work speaks so much, not so much about the rich, but also the poor. Not so much of the luxury apartment, but so much of the informality. So Dr. Town Planner Lukman, how do we bridge this gap in Lagos and in African cities?
Thank you. How do we bridge that gap? What I've seen so far is that in terms of governance structure for many African cities, and I will take Lagos as a very key example in this regard. In terms of governance structure, I think that structure is lopsided. And it is lopsided in a way that the key institutions that are driving the development, that are driving infrastructure delivery, that are driving the basic urban services, they are overwhelmed because they are concentrated at the level of the state government. You know, in many African cities, there are a hierarchy of structures. For example, if we take Lagos as an example, we have a federal government, we have a state government, we have a local government, and of course, we have a community level, which are non-state state institutions, but at the local level, the communities are there performing one role or the other. So at the federal level, the roles and responsibilities are very clear on what they should be doing regarding the foreign issue, internal security, and all that. Those rules are very clear for the federal government. But at the state level, where we have major responsibilities regarding the delivery of urban services, such as a transportation system, waste management system, energy delivery, housing for the healthcare system. So all these rules, they are at the state government level. And from what I've seen so far, all these rules are becoming overwhelming for the state government. And what the state government has been able to do is that in terms of having, combining the strategy of making these services or making this infrastructure available, state government has appropriated that role, that aspect, that component the strategy component to itself. Then in any hierarchy as well, there should be operational level apart from strategy. So if one part is dealing with the strategy, then another part is dealing with the operational side of that issue. But what we have seen is that both the strategy and the operational are now concentrated at the state level. So the local government that is closer to the people, they play minimal role in terms of delivery of services to the people. So over a period of years, those roles, it is clear that the state government cannot perform those roles. So in most cases, when you look at Lagos State, and you look at the flow of a population, you discover that the number of a road that we have in terms of mileage or in terms of a kilometer per the city or per density of the city, the total kilometers still remain less than 3,000 kilometers to serve a population of 28 million. And that is quite overwhelming. So in that regard, the state government developed the policy, how the roads should be delivered, how the roads should be managed, how the road should be maintained and operational. But at the local government level, they play minimal role in making the roads available. So the role that is assigned to the local government is very minimal compared to what should be happening. So our thinking is that if that role could be disaggregated, for example, if the state government takes the role of a strategy and say, local government, we empower you to begin to deal with internal rules, different internal rules, and a different collector rules, and the state government take charge of maybe arterial and some expressway in conjunction with the federal government. So we could see that it will reduce drastically the level of responsibility of the state government, and we make certain things happen to the residents of Lagos. So the same thing is applicable in the water sector. As at today, there is a conflicting report on the number of people that have access to public supply water system. One report is saying 13.3% of residents of Lagos have access to public supply of water. Another report is saying about just about 3% or thereabout. So, but in all these reports, one thing is clear that the access to public supply of a water system in Lagos is less than 20%. And in a city of 28 million people again, that is quite low. So over the years, since the beginning of independence, the Lagos state government has really been in charge of water delivery. So there is a minimal role for the local government that are closer and of course, very engaged regularly with the people at the grassroots level. So there is no role for the local government in the supply chain of water. So the same thing applicable in the area of sanitation, whereby the local people begin to devise their own strategy, their own means of getting the wastewater and sanitation issue resolved. So if we look at the healthcare system as well, so the same thing is playing out. So the way to go is that we need to look at that decentralization of responsibilities between the state and of course between the local government, so that we can have more roles at the local level, because I could imagine if three local governments could come together and say, okay, we are having our own water corporation at Igodo, at Kotun, we are having our own water corporation, which will serve our community. And of course, what we need to equally look at is that since we have this water corporation at the level of a Lagos state government, it has denied the city that critical manpower that the city could need in the future to develop or to maintain or to push forward the issue of a water supply and sanitation system in the city, because that rules only concentrated on the state level. The same thing is in the housing sector. Today, when it comes to the issue of housing, land accessibility and all that, all those things are residual with the state government. And of course, with the level of demand with the level of the need in the housing sector, which runs to about 2 million units and things like that, we have a Lagos State government ability to provide maybe less than 1,000 units in a year. So, but one can imagine if at the 57 local government and LCDA that we have, they are responsible in their different communities. It goes a long way to make things happen and to reduce the pressure and of course to reduce that huge demand or huge need in the housing sector. So when we look at the governance structure, it's very key on how we are able to decentralize these roles and responsibility between the states and the local government. Another area that I need to mention is the issue of manpower. Okay, the manpower is very key. Like I said, over the years, we have concentrated those roles at the state government. So it has denied the city that manpower. So we really do not have that manpower to translate some of our plans into implementable actions or implementable infrastructure that we can see on ground. So funding is equally a major issue. So if you look at the state government budget for different infrastructure and provision for different communities, it is far below of what is required to meet the demand of the city on yearly basis. So it's a very critical issue that we need to begin to look at innovative funding financing that will deliver the basic urban services and infrastructure for our people. So a whole lot of things to really take on in that regard. But let me stop here so that others can make contributions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Temple, and I look forward for your response on that. So at this point, I'll just go to Dr. Lindsay on your work on urban informalities. And I would like to ask, how can local capacities be strengthened for effective delivery, looking at sustainable urban development, particularly for the poor people in the city? How can local capacities be developed? What can be done based on what is happening at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think, as Lukman was saying, there's so much already being done by the residents, and there's so much organization already happening. For instance, in recent work, looking at landlords and residents associations, both in wealthy estates and ordinary neighborhoods. And really, they are performing the role of local government with sort of just the tacit acknowledgement that, you know, they're registered, but none of their functions are actually officially happening according to current governance structures. But I think it's the question how to support these already enormous capacities is a really tricky one, because I think any further regulation or formalization risks making it really clunky and also not fit for the sort of fine tuning that it happens, because it, you know, it's like each neighborhood, each street, each estate has its own sort of way of doing things. And that might not be the most efficient, and it's definitely too much of a burden on the residents themselves. But how could it be, how could the functionality be preserved through further regulation or formalization that might reduce some of that time and effort burden, but then it might make it too expensive or not fit for purpose? So I think it's definitely a question that's worth asking, but I think a solution, sort of seeking a solution, could actually be inflicting a lot of damage and violence on these strategies that have been honed out of necessity and now are quite an everyday pattern. So I think it's always this dual thing of things aren't good enough. People deserve to have easier, better lives, but are any improvements actually going to have very ambivalent or negative effects? So I think it constantly needs to be this conversation between proposals and speculation, but then grounding it in really in the realities that are there, and constantly having that reciprocal conversation with the people who are already doing the work and what they need. So I think that's it. Yeah, it's a difficult question to ask, and it's more like how you ask it and then how you try to respond. And as with PROS work, that's really in conversation with the people themselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Now move to Dr. Remy, the man at the UN Habitat. How are we faring with SDG 2030, going to SDG 11, making our cities safe, resilient, inclusive, and sustainable? Of the new urban agenda of leaving no one behind, how are we faring in the cities of the South, in Lagos? How do we go from there? Thank you.
Well, I think as the previous speaker, the question is not easy to answer. There's not just one simple answer to that question. But the overall, I would say, sentiment is that we are not doing that well in fulfilling our commitment for the Sustainable Development Goals, especially the one on to make our cities more resilient, healthier, to improve well-being, to improve the quality of life in cities across all the targets. So generally on the SDGs, we are falling behind. As you know, the way the SDGs were designed is that they complement each other. It's not only the one focusing on cities, but how is health impacts on others. And when we talk about the work of Professor Lawanson, the poverty, which is number one, how is concentrated in some part of the city, because there are so many issues of inequality, and that's why that spirit of equity is so critical. So the Secretary General in 2020 had said we have only a decade of action. We have all the intentions, all the things, but we have now less than, I would say, 8 years, or 7.5 years or so to get that done. But particularly in Africa, we are not doing that well. There are some countries that are trying in some areas, especially if I take the case of, say, Morocco, you will see that they are making good progress. But in sub-Saharan Africa, the picture is not that good. Just based on some of the assessments, I would say independent assessment by different actors in that. But again, under the caveat that the SDGs was also designed for voluntary reporting, that countries should actually tell each other what they are doing. So that's, and many are not reporting, unfortunately. The same for the new urban agenda. I think last time we checked, we had about 25 country reports. So what we have been doing is what we call the quadrennial report. Every 4 years, we try to undertake kind of assessment to see where we are, to get a kind of feel and trend. Globally, so there are some regional trends, but even on the new urban agenda, we are not, I would not say we are on track. We are not where we should be. And we know many of the issues, again, in the design, the intentional design of the new urban agenda, or the Agenda 2030 in general, is global. It's not some that are focusing on some countries. So all the issues that are being highlighted in all the 2030 agenda, from the financing, from climate change to disaster to the development agenda, all of them are relevant to all of us. This means that we are all in together. So Africa cannot stand out, the same spirit of leaving no one behind. Europe cannot really deliver on the SDG by its own. It needs Africa in that way so that we as humanity can move forward together. That's what the spirit. But unfortunately, as part of that puzzle, we are not doing that well. Of course, the roles have been distributed across. It's not government, is also a loose word. So I think it's our individual responsibility, and the work that Professor Lawanson have been doing here is to draw the attention to say, let's also appreciate the role of informal settlement, people living in that type of settlements. Let's look at the informal economy as contributor to improving the quality of life. So this is just from the academic point of view and how it can inform a global agenda, global debate. This type of work is very important because we think that formal is the way to go. Professor Lawanson is telling us informal as well matters. We have to do, he said, let's be inclusive. We have to look at all the spaces, and particularly the one that I'm responsible for is the one on SDG 11.A that says development urban, rural, peri-urban areas, meaning the continuum of space where we have to ensure that it's developed together, that there is integrated development, that there is, they call it the decentralization of fiscal space, meaning that no space is fiscally deprived or financially deprived to actually build on its potential. So again, I think the academic work, the evidence that is coming from the laboratory of Lagos is very informative. Unfortunately, we are not doing well. Let's look again at that type of evidence to accelerate even further the implementation or the delivering on the global agenda. Sorry to say just one word on the African agenda as one 2060. It's not only the 2030, but we have a very important one of which the work of Professor Lawanson talks to that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your response. I invite Dr. Femi to answer Dr. Muyiwa on the two questions, and I'll move to Monica. Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. Maybe probably my question, I'm not sure, maybe it might be related more to Monica, or I'm not sure, but I will ask the question, so to say. From what we did on Thursday, the session we did on Thursday, which I coordinated, and the one we're doing today, of course, something is coming very clearly in terms of the capacity of Professor Lawanson to transcend just only academic, go beyond academic and work with people in the civil organization and work with community. And one of the problems or the challenges that maybe the academia they have is that ability to actually work very well with civil society organization and work with community. Without the communities or the civil society organization being extracted, that extractivism, there is that potential that they feel, okay, the lack of trust, and they feel being extracted, and because of that, they withdraw. But I just want to ask, like somebody who has been working and probably doing this, successfully with civil society organization and the communities. So maybe probably because Monica is in the civil society organization. So how much of what you think Professor Lawanson has been doing this? And do you feel, or the people you work with, do you feel that they think being extracted through our work, or she's been doing it, very well? So what do you think about that? What can you say?
Okay, yeah, thanks for that question. It's an interesting question. The danger of the communities of feeling extracted is always there. They also feel a danger with the civil society, So I would say we are a bit on the side of the academia. But from the work that we have been doing with Professor Lawanson, I must say that, and I mentioned the example of the Ajegunle Ikorodu community, but that is only one example. We have so many other examples of communities, but also, as I said, with the informal waste workers, where we tried to advocate and to include them in more institutionalized structures. So I can, from my own side or my own experience, I never felt that any of the communities felt extracted. At all. On the contrary, as I said, it was very, Professor Lawanson and the whole research team, there's a team behind her, the work and the mentoring and the coordination with the communities has always been very helpful and very well received. What I think where communities feel extracted, and that is not our fault, and that is the problem of the academia, and is also the problem of us in the civil society, is that we cannot help them. We can work with them, we can try to make their life better, we can try to give them more, let's say, self-confidence, we can encourage them, but we cannot do physical change, and that is what they expect. And that is where we also maybe have to find a way and sit together to see how can we link, maybe bring in private sector or whatever, or really find financial means and ways of changing the life of the communities in reality. But otherwise, I don't think, it's a pity. Maybe you should have invited someone from the community, and you would only hear praises and gratefulness, I think, for all that has been done so far.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. Probably before you go to the last question, thank you, Monica. And I think just want to highlight that, because that is one of those things that I've seen in her. Because most of, the work she has done, I see in the community, they're so comfortable with her and they keep coming back. Probably navigating that space is something that is worthy of commendation, because I know it's always like struggle with many academia and the community and civil society organizations. They always have that feeling, but she's been able to navigate that space very well. Bringing civil society, bringing government, then bringing communities to talk together, be at the table and discuss. So, and I think it's something, for me, I think it's very commendable that academia actually need to learn from. So probably, maybe, well, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
So, please.
Okay, Dr. Muyiwa, excuse me. How can we hold public officials accountable to protect the rights of the common man, to uphold individual or collective rights against gentrification in housing in marketplaces? Where is Dr. Muyiwa? So interesting. Okay, maybe anybody can answer it out of our panelists, but how can we hold the public officials accountable to protect the rights of the common man in terms of the proper? Because we see Lagos, like I had some interviews with Town Planner Lukman and also with Monica, and there is an urban divide. But how do we hold our government responsible to protect the rights of everybody at the same time? Anybody can go for it. We have less than 10 minutes to be out of the session.
Well, it is a very complex question, so to say, especially in cities of Africa, where policy or perhaps the key instrument of managing a urban system, budget, expenditure, they are still not clear, or not a good level of transparency are not there yet. So it makes the situation to be complex, because when you want to make somebody accountable, you must have a baseline, and you should be able to say, okay, from that baseline, this is what has been expended, these are the projects covered, and these are the outcome of those expenditure. So for the populace, that capacity to really navigate or to really ask those kind of questions are not there. And what I've seen in the political class is that they are not too keen to make that changes or to empower the citizens to be able to ask those critical questions. So, and if we have that situation, it makes it complex. For example, I will look at the, let's say, Lagos traffic law. In that law of about maybe 54 pages or so, it differs so much on what citizens should do, and how citizens should not contravene the law. You don't take a one way, you wear your seatbelt. If you don't do this, these are the penalties. If you don't take the right route, these are the penalties and all that. So a whole lot of issues for the citizens. But one key questions I would have expect that law to answer is that we have so many damaged roads within the city. What will be the right, or on what basis will the citizens say, hey, based on this law, I can take government to the court within certain period of months if this road is not repaired? So that law, in my opinion, should change the citizens by not making such a provision that could make a government accountable to the citizens whose vehicles are being damaged by bad roads, whose vehicles are being knocked out from time to time. So those are the kind of areas that we need to be looking at for each policy, for each law, for each legislation that is coming out. There should be something like an inbuilt mechanism that could check the government as well on the part of the citizens. So I think is one area that we need to begin to look at in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Town Planner Lukman. So one of the things you find in Professor Taibat Lawanson's work is holding people and governments in our work, in our scholarship, asking questions. So how do we hold our government and leaders accountable? Dr. Olumuyiwa, your final reflections in 1 minute. I don't know what you have to say.
Okay, sorry, I've been having an issue with my network, so I had to switch off my video. But it's interesting to see that we have someone who is taking a lead in terms of scholarship in Lagos. So we have some foot to hold, a place to place our foot in. There's so much more we need to do in Lagos. Just like I said, we need knowledge.
We are losing you. Sorry. Okay. Okay, Lindsay, your final reflection, 1 minute. Thank you very much.
I'm probably going to just repeat myself, but yeah, thank you. No, I'll just say thank you to the organizers for taking the time to organize this and inviting such two really wonderful panels. So I think it's been a real asset to the conference, and yeah, thanks again for the opportunity, and thanks to Taibat.
Thank you so much. Dr. Amin, your final reflections in 1 minute before we have Monica, then Professor Taibat. Yes.
Yes, it's of course an honor. Great to see in the research world what you may consider at our layers really outshining. So we have to, as we see, some of us agree, we need many of those. We need many of those in African cities, in different issues. It's not only cities issue, but issues that have been sometimes neglected or misunderstood, and place them in the right place. So Professor Lawanson's very well done. The journey is still long. It's an uncharted territory, so keep innovating and keep guiding us, helping us really pick up some of these pieces for our advocacy and policy guidance. So keep up with the good work.
Thank you very much. Monica, where do we go from here? Informality, speaking for the people who cannot speak without voices, your final reflections and your work. Yeah.
Oh, where do we go from here? Well, I think we just continue what we have been doing. We give the communities their voices. We give them their abilities, as you said, I mean, to ask for transparency, for accountability, because I also wanted to say that this resilience action plan, I mean, it is a good tool, I mean, for asking, for the communities to ask their government officials for accountability. It has priority areas, it has initiatives, and they just follow one to the other. and ask them to help them implement it. And so I think it's a good way for the ministries, for government officials, also for decision makers to wake up and say that people know what they want. So I think we just continue the way we are doing. I mean, Professor Lawanson has always been an asset to our partners network. I know that a lot of our partners ask her for advice, ask her for questions. She supports what we have been doing. She is not afraid of speaking out, also controversially. Also, she does it in a very diplomatic way, maybe in a much more diplomatic way than we in the civil society will do it. So that is another asset that she contributes to our network, because sometimes she might be too strong, too forceful. So yeah, I think we continue the good cooperation that we had, the mentoring young talents and engaged people, people who are, I mean, who have commitment for the people of our city in Lagos, but also commitment just for vulnerable people and to make their life better. So I think that is also what she wants to do.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you, everybody, to our panelists, to all our attendees for your comments. We're saying thank you. At this point, I would like to have the privilege and the honor to invite Professor Taibat Lawanson. Yes, thank you. Please come over.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for the kind words, for the reflections on the journey that we have all taken together over the years. I'm very happy to see that our little contributions are bearing fruit. I remember Lukman traveling 5 hours in Boko Haram territory to Bauchi, Remy chasing after you at World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi, and you making sure that Lagos gets on the pathway to getting an urban policy. Monica, from 2011, from crazy ideas to making sure community participates and community benefits. Lindsay, you have been wonderful, from sharing ideas, from thinking thoughts, writing proposals, pushing from Sheffield to Birmingham, and now we're in Addis and Gulu and other African cities. It's been a great journey. And I thank you very much to my colleagues and friends among the attendees and in the chat room who have also contributed to this journey. Like it has been said by the panelists, there's a long way to go for the emancipation of our people. So I will just close by saying, let us just keep working together, working hard. And as you said, Taiwo, Femi, and Omo, let's hold our governments accountable. And in the words of the transformative commitment of the United Nations, let us ensure that no one and no place is left behind. Thank you very much, guys. I'm really grateful. Back to you, Taiwo.
Thank you so much, Professor Taibat Lawanson. Thanks to all our panelists. Also, special thanks to starting from Dr. Lindsay. Thank you so much. Town Planner Lukman Oshodi, thanks for your contribution. I know you still have a lot for us, but we still look for other ways of having more talk and chat. Thanks to Dr. Remy, thanks to Monica, thanks to Dr. Muyiwa, and to the organizers as well, Dr. Lumiwa and Omo. Thanks to everybody. All attendees, thank you so much. We see your comments. Kudirat, thank you so much. Damilola, thank you so much. We are grateful. Omobolanyi, thank you so much. And at this point, I think we have to end this session now. And thanks to the LSA committee as well. Have a great evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in the part of the world.
Thank you.
And to those that please want to get to know more what is happening at WOOF, let's see how we do well with the world, with the agendas and development plans. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.